Canada on the news that taught how to make video games.
Mhm.
This school is called Digipen,
Mhm.
and I always loved video games from pretty much age 6. I'm playing a lot of different games on the PC, and then
Mhm.
eventually like Nintendo, Sega Genesis, and all that.
Mhm.
And so I'd always been particularly interested in building stuff. I was doing things like with really early web pages. I would experiment with level editors and different games that had them. Games like Duke Nukem, Quake, all those.
Mhm.
And so I'd always be kind of playing with like I didn't want to just play mods that other people have made. I want to be like, how do I make a mod? How do I
Mhm.
modify it? And so and I always drew a lot. I was always into art. Was this kind of thing that always followed me, and a skill set that I was always into. And so when I heard about that, I was like, I got to go to that school. And I basically was like, probably an unusual child. Like at age 14, I was like, I'm going to that school. And I kept trying to figure out what do I need to apply? What are the things I need to learn?
Mhm.
And I graduated early when I was 17. And right about then, Digipen decided that they were going to move their campus next to actually on the Nintendo campus in Seattle, Redmond.
Mhm. Oh,
And
wow.
that I was living in Washington at the time. And so that was actually closer to me. I didn't have to navigate going to another country, Canada, um, which is funny because we didn't really feel like Canada was a different country because it was literally a half hour like away from us. I grew up on the border. And so, but they decided that they're going to move. And so I actually ended up becoming one of their first year students after they moved to the States.
Oh, so that's great. So it was like kind of a perfect timing for you when
Yeah.
you had that moment to move. Just they arrive at like maybe I don't know if it's closer to your place because you were saying like you was in the border, so maybe it was not even closer, but unless it's in the States, so maybe it was easier to
Yeah.
move.
It was probably easier because
Mhm.
it was about 3 hours away from where
Mhm.
my parents lived, so I could still go home and visit them easily, which was nice. I
Mhm.
think they were originally in Vancouver, which I honestly don't remember exactly what the drive time would have been, but it made certain things easier. I
Mhm.
didn't have to navigate any visa issues or anything like
Yeah,
that.
that kind of things, it's always complicated. Even for students, it's a lot of paperwork. And I'm curious, do you had any game that made you decide, okay, this is what I want to do, or was more like a growing love playing game after game? There was something that like a moment pivotal that you say, okay, I want to do this, I really need to do this.
It's kind of interesting because I think I just had a passion for what games were at a pretty young age. I think what really grabbed me was, and particularly was stories within games.
Hmm.
So very early games that many people probably don't even remember, Police Quest, Space Quest.
Hmm.
And then as those got more mature, things like Monkey Island,
Mm. Oh, yeah.
that had a story that it was more than just a game. That there are many games out there. They're just like more like chess or
Yeah.
whatever, and they're fine.
Hmm.
But I just love the story aspect.
Yes, I remember Monkey Island from it was from LucasArts and the Day of the Tentacle that I think it was later that
Hmm.
was awesome that game, and it was more like a point and click adventure kind of thing.
Yeah,
But the story was incredible. I remember like going. I didn't have it. I went to my friend's house to play with him, and it was cool because we can try to guess between two what do next. That was also like team playing kind of thing before multiplayer.
yeah. I mean, it's funny because I remember like then like as time went on, this stuff just got more complex, and I would
Mhm.
just be like, um, even games like Mega Man and stuff like
Mhm.
that drew me in, even though their story was a lot more light.
Mhm.
It felt like things are starting to become more complex as well, as the games could start going have a, kind
Yeah.
of like branching paths and things like that. Um,
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, I For me, I'm terrible. Like, how do you say? Like, psychomotor. I don't know how to call. Like the coordination between my brain and my fingers. It's terrible. So I was more in the games that are less that kind of skill. I'm more like thinking about, or you know, and yeah, I Warcraft I think was my first big crash. Like really, like the PC one, and well, was a lot of that. But this one I think I spent too much time. I mean,
For
and it
me,
was
it
the
was
first.
probably games like the one that pulled me into more of the multiplayer aspect was well, actually, honestly, I got into very early text-based MUDs. Which were basically, so you're basically playing online with other players, but it's all text. So it's like Zork.
Oh wow!
And so that's how old I am.
I never heard about
Basically,
that.
very early on, the only games you could play online were more like that style.
Oh.
So so we so I played a lot of early MUDs, and then it's multi-user dungeon. That's what MUD stands for.
Oh.
And then my friend was really into. He was a network guy, so he was always getting me into like, hey, you should check this out. And the internet in general, he was always making me aware of it earlier. So he was older than me by, I don't know, 8 years, and he was going to college to be like a networking guy. And he would just introduce me to all these things. So it'd be like, oh, check this out, check that out. Check this out. We can actually talk to people in our same neighborhood through these chat channels. And it was like before internet was more mainstream. And we're just like dialing up with 14.4K modem, and like when my mom would pick up, it would kill the internet. Which is super annoying.
Yeah.
And so I was playing that, and then I actually forgot that I did a lot of that, and then even that slowly improved over time, where I played a game that probably nobody else also has ever heard of, called The Realm, which was very similar to King's Quest, except Sierra had made it where it was like you would walk to the edge of the screen, and then a new screen would appear.
Oh.
And it was basically pre EpiQuest and pre a lot of those games, and so I played that game when.
Yeah, that's. I think this is way earlier than. I think my first taste of online was with Diablo, the first one I think they had, and it was modern, like with it takes forever to and then I think I play like a couple of hours, and back then there was this play killer song. I don't know how. So I get in, and they just kill me, another player kill me or something like that, and get all my stuff that was nothing basically. But and I try a few times, and okay, give up. And after, I don't know, I think past year something like playing again online, I was more like single quest guy, I guess. Anyway, so
I also got into like Ultima Online and stuff like that. Those were fun.
That's all. I don't have now time for
old games.
For games. It's terrible. Like well, it's life, I guess. Like family, work, things like that. And I have a lot of games now. I have more games than ever. Like, on my Steam and my Unreal store. I have a lot of games that I don't play. Just get it there and stay there when I have time, maybe. So, and going a little back, or just taking the conversation of so you went to this school, and after that you started as a texture artist, but you quickly evolved to how fast was your change from texturing to going to tech art? I mean, was something that happened quickly, or?
Yeah, I ended up, I just, after I was in school for a year, I really just wanted to get into the industry as quickly as possible, because for me school is really expensive, and I didn't want to take in a lot of debt. So my teacher happened to be friends with some people at a company called Pipeworks back in Eugene, Oregon, and a bunch of the people that worked there actually had worked on games like Police Quest and Space Quest. So there was a bunch of people that like Mark Crow, who invented Space Quest.
Oh
So
wow.
I was like, oh, this sounds awesome. I want to go work for these guys. And so I took an internship there. I was making nothing. I was like living in my parents had friends there, so I was living in their garage, in the spare room in their garage. It had no windows. I had no idea what time of day it was when I'd wake up for work. But I was totally jazzed because I was making video games, what I wanted to do. And at the end of the internship, they said, yeah, like, let's keep you. And so I was working on textures and like ended up doing a bunch of environment stuff. But our first game was got canceled, and it was this game that was like the Xbox was just coming out, first Xbox OD. And so we were going to work on one of the titles that were going to be an early release for them. And we were super excited. We're working on this thing. We're a brand new company. We had like a bunch of the people that were working there were from a company that no longer exists called Dynamics. They're the people that made like Red Baron. They worked on a lot of the stuff for Sierra, like Willie Beamish.
Yeah, and
things.
I
And
know
so
Dynamics. Yes.
yeah, so they were, a lot of people were from there, and so we were cobbling together every little bit that we could to make this game. And then this little known company, Bungie, came along, and we had been paying attention to them, so we'd see cool stuff posted by them back when it was like a strategy game, and you'd see their vehicle driving around and kicking up rocks, and that seemed like really impressive back then. And ironically, I work for Microsoft now. Back then, Microsoft was our publisher, and they decided they didn't want to continue with us, and they wanted to continue with Bungie. And we had this side project going on that nobody was really terribly excited about at the time. That was a game that was using the Godzilla IP, and it was we were didn't I don't think anybody thought that was even knew that was going to go anywhere. And so when this other project got canceled, I ended up getting laid off for a short bit, and they decided to bring me back on. They're like, hey, do you want to, our character artists no longer work here, could you work on modeling the characters? And I had done a wide range of stuff through school, but not professionally. And so I was like, sure, I'll do it. And so I just started, I joined there, and they said, well, here, how about you work on a character for a little bit, and if this works out, we'll keep you on to do that. And so I came back on, and I started modeling Godzilla characters. But like, we were a tiny company, so I ended up modeling the characters, texturing the characters, figuring out like what was the best way to UV them so I didn't have seams. I was rigging them, I was animating them. Basically, like the first Godzilla game we shipped, like I modeled all the characters, rigged all the characters, animated all the characters. So I learned a lot about the general pipeline of the character stuff, and that's what probably started converting me into becoming a technical artist, because I started seeing all the things I could automate. Very, very early version of Maya or 3ds Max is what I was using, and like I just wanted to do simple things. Like I had like a character where it's like I want to move the arm from here to here, and I want to mirror the pose, and there was no tools like that. So I would go and I'd ask a programmer, I'm like, can you add me like a tool to 3ds Max where I can get a plugin, I can go model, and it would take I might convince a programmer to do it, and it would take 2 weeks, and then it wouldn't be what I wanted. And I'd be like, man, if I could do this myself, it would be way better. And I actually remember them allowing me to go to a particular GDC. And I remember going to this talk by this pretty I don't know how well known he is, but his name's Paul Neal. And he's up in Canada, lives up in Canada, and I think he still does stuff now. And he gave this talk about as a tech artist, being like scripting rigs and like how he was automating things, and like it really inspired me. I was like, I can do this. I can figure this out. And that was probably my turning point in my career for becoming a tech artist, where I went home and I started like being like just digging up. There's this book called pretty old book now. I don't know if it's in print anymore. I still have. It's called like Max Script. And Max Script and the SDK or something like that. And it went through like how does Max Script work, and I think it also went to the API.
Mhm. Yeah, well, I don't know the book, but yeah, I know the feeling, like to discovering little by little these things, and then, but I think I mean, it's really nice that you had the chance to. I mean, I'm being Spanish. I mean, in Spain there was nothing. Well, there was some stuff, but not really like the GDC kind of talks where there's technical people that doing talks very specific. It was more like festivals that they show stuff, or very like maybe for general public, or not for people working on the industry. So yeah, that's I mean, it's really cool if you went to GDC and have like direct exposition to the pros, or to the edge people, like that were like showing stuff that was not even a thing before. Like I guess like even like
Yeah,
you said. Yeah.
tech artist was not a position. So
Mhm.
like one thing I kind of skipped over is and I remember this because this was also kind of a interesting thing, is the studio head of Pipeworks when I got laid off. Like um he was like, when you go to look for work, like I think one of the things you should like be thinking about is like that you're more of a technical artist. Like when I build stuff like a building, I was thinking about like what is the angle that the roof needs to be so that the character can walk on it,
Mhm.
and things like that. And I was always much
Mhm.
more tuned into that than other artists because I just wanted to make sure it worked correctly in the game. And when I started getting into like when I even saw this stuff at GDC, I don't even remember what they called him. I think it was like a master class from GDC. Actually, it was master class from Discrete, which owned
Yeah, it's
3ds Max at the
yeah.
time,
Mhm.
and I or a sponsored class or something, and I went in and that just like helped me see like, oh, we can actually rig characters and not just put in um, the standard character studio
Oh,
biped.
the iPad, yes.
and and the biped had, it was great for somebody that's just trying to jam something in there. It was really limited for other things, and you could only animate with quaternions, which some of the animators like
The TDC is
really
what's called?
despised.
T
What's that?
the TDC? How is the way that the TDC? You had a name for.
Yeah, you would open up the graph,
Uh-huh.
and you didn't have handles.
Yeah.
And so I actually think in a lot of ways Character Studio caused a lot of damage for 3ds Max because the animators are like, well, I want to go over to this package and Maya because it lets you have these handles to animate with. But Max actually had that. It's just most people didn't know how to make a rig. And so when I saw this other guy do it, I was like, oh, this is possible. Like I didn't really know anything about Maya at the time, so I didn't really have a comparison.
Mhm.
But when I saw him do that, I started building my own stuff. And to be honest, most of the early stuff, the animators were just like, they didn't like, they weren't really that into it. But there were certain things that I had to build that had no choice, like the character biped just didn't work for. Like I was building like a little larvae thing for
Mhm.
that was in for Mothra or something, and Godzilla. And so I used those moments to like start experimenting with making like custom controls, I started doing like my own custom tools. Like 3ds Max actually had some really powerful ways of working that I only saw Paul Neal doing. Like
Mhm.
he was the only, if any, even if others were doing it, they weren't sharing it, and he was. And that was a pretty important thing because that inspired me to be able to do it.
Mhm.
And I think some people probably were like, even if they knew, they didn't share it because there's like, oh, well, other people will know, and then that will like affect my job or something later. And it's like Paul Neal was just very open, shared a lot, and he would even post stuff on his website all the time
Mhm.
about the tools
Wh-
that he made, and I'd see it and try to replicate them.
do you remember the year that was that? Like, was
That
early
was
2000s?
probably like, if I were to look back, it was probably around 2003, 2004,
Mm.
maybe 2002. It was somewhere in there. It was pretty
Uh,
early on when I saw it.
yeah, I think about that time. Yeah, it's still like I remember, like for instance, was more generalist and maybe modeler, and you had animator, and that
Yeah.
was the and for instance, where I get my first job as animator, the rigs were done by the animators itself.
Yeah, for sure.
And
And
yeah,
I think that's like you had to wear all kinds of hats. You just had no choice.
yeah, yeah, and then yeah, little by little there was this more specialization. I mean, I think it was. I mean, it's natural because the complexity of the pipelines nowadays it requires such a specialization, and I mean, if you want to be good at something, you really need to invest on that, and that's cool, and that's also like scary or terrible in some situations. If I mean, I like I don't know you, but I like what I'm doing a lot, but also I like to do other things from time to time, and sometimes yeah it's a
Okay.
bit yeah like okay I need to do something maybe personal or something just to get to do the other things.
Yeah, so for me, probably there were a few big turning points in my career towards the end of Pipeworks, where at one point, I remember working on a project called Rampage, and we are basically recreating the old arcade game, but we wanted to do it in 3D. And I started like I wrote my. They had built like a script. You could. Our level editor was basically all in code. You basically would script where the buildings were, and it was a very simple thing. So it was like Rampage. You just had the buildings in a straight row, and I actually wrote a level editor that would read that file, generate it in 3ds Max, and then you could edit it and write it back out. And 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 it's actually funny, like looking back at that I was doing all these things. Like I was first off, I was single and I had no time but to think about work. So I was like, I modeled like a few characters. I defined what their art style would be, and then I sent those off to outsourcing. I had like 38 more characters, and I was managing that. I was managing our animation team. We and then while doing that, I was super interested in just like all the stuff I could do with tools. Like I said, I was writing that level editor. At one point, I was like, I'd been using a thing called Deep Paint for a while for painting
I
characters
remember,
for the color
yes.
maps. But then this new program had come out called Zbrush, and I made like I wanted to figure out like how I could create like normal maps that would be more accurate. So I started painting fur and stuff with ZBrush in it, and and it looked really cool. And what's funny is I remember, so back then we used bump maps for almost everything, just basically black and white. And when I made these normal maps, I was like, these look more accurate. And I actually remember the programmers and different people being like, I don't know if this matters or if we need this. Normal maps.
That it's bread and butter today. It's like
Yeah.
what?
And it's just so funny because like ZBrush was able to do that stuff. And I think there's a few things during that phase of my life where one, I started realizing I was thinking bigger picture for like, I remember at one point we were making multiple characters, and I came back to the studio head and said, hey, like we promised 4 different types of characters to the publisher, but I'm mapping everything out and there's no way we're going to get there. We're going to only be able to use these 3 because the animators are moving at this speed. We've only been able to build these 3 rigs. And even if I to build the 4th rig, I just don't think the animation will be done. And I remember, I was thinking if I go tell the studio head this, he's going to be mad because this is what he promised. And what he did is he came back and said, okay, we'll do 3 because I had all the data there. I was able to present it. And so I think that was a phase where I probably grew quite a bit and just understanding more about what leadership really meant. Like I was just doing stuff. I didn't really think so much about myself as being a leader. I'd just been there for a long time. I'd figured out how everything worked, and then I just like.
But this is really interesting. The point that you did here, like when you do these kind of things, you should always give the this data. So it's not like I can do this or I cannot do this just flat. It's we have this situation, this is the data we have now, or this is the speed that we go, and this is the results that we get last X time. And if we go in this speed, like we're not gonna reach this, or we're gonna hit this, and maybe we can add an, I don't know, in the other situation that can be the other way around, like, oh, do you want to add one more character? I think we can get an extra animation or something like that. So that's very important, and this is something that not too many people get to that point naturally. They I will say, from my experience, I found like the there is no sometimes this like methodical way to rationalize the things. Sometimes that you feel like you don't reach in the goals or something, and but instead of thinking why, it's like kind of panicking mode, and and doesn't help that at all, because doesn't if you don't have the background data, you don't know
Yeah.
where to fix the things, or where to change, because you don't know what's going on. Do you find
Yep.
that? And sometimes also in, I mean, not you, but like, do you find these kind of situations in places or in projects?
Yeah, just like the question is like if people like can present the data or learn about it, like more like
Yeah, if they can rationalize the, I mean, sometimes, because when we do this, it's, I mean, still an art, even it's a technical, and some stuff it's hard to contabilize. Like, let's say it's not like doing like something that you do in a machine that it's always the same. So the way that we handle the data, that how, like, let's say when you reach this point that telling your boss, okay, we don't think we're gonna have time to do this a fourth character, because we have this speed on these characters, and we, I mean, you went to talk with to him with data, actual data.
yep.
But I found sometimes that um in some situations that people don't come with the data, they just get stressed, they don't know why, or they just don't have any rational thought behind. It's just like they just go say, I cannot do it. But why? It's slow. I don't know. It's just I cannot. It's taking too long. But
It's
why?
too
Where is
much.
it?
Yeah.
Where is taking too long? I don't know. It's just like and like kind of block.
Yeah, it's something that when I was doing that work was also not only were technical artists not common, or if even that term was used, production or producers were not like a common thing either. It was like even just thinking about how do you schedule something out, like
Mhm.
in a lot of ways I felt like when we were making games, I still feels like that today. It sometimes just feels like happy accidents that we learn from like trying this and trying that and trying this again until we arrive and stumble upon what we're trying to get to. But yeah, I think data-driven decisions is definitely something that's more and more important. Like if you want to be able to make something that's you're actually going to have any idea of where you're going to arrive at. And that can be very small things. It can be like, well, we know we're making 10 animations a week. And if you've worked on previous games, you can kind of roughly extrapolate how many animations you ended up with on your last project. And you know there's going to be more. We always make something bigger. And you can kind of map things out. And that definitely helps. I mean, even as you're just stumbling through things, you can be like, wow, it took me 6 months to work on this character. That's like we can't, like we won't be able to keep building stuff at this speed. We have to find a way to make it faster or whatever. But yeah.
Yeah. So, and just continue with the one of the points that we wanted to talk. It's like, like now that you become like a technical art director, what's that technical art director for you? Because everybody has his own description, and I think there is a amalgamation of titles, and so it was not a thing before, and now it's many things, can be many things.
Yeah, it certainly can be. Like I've known different technical art directors at different places. And there are also sometimes there's different places that have a lot of people and they have even dedicated technical art directors. So like for example, I know this studio up in Canada, the coalition, they have a dedicated tech art director for that's more focused on the rendering, and then one that's more focused on characters. And so for me, like, it's been one of those things I kind of probably semi stumbled into. Like, after I'd left Naughty Dog, I joined a company called Sony Bend, and when I first got there, I was just going to be a principal character TD, and I kind of figured, in some respects, after leaving Naughty Dog, which was actually pretty intense place to work, I thought, oh, it's going to be it'll be a little bit easier because probably the quality bar and things like that won't be as intensely scrutinized. And after being there for probably 3-4 months, I had a guy that I reported to that was the tech art director, and basically told me that I didn't realize where this conversation was going, but he started off being like, "Hey, I told my managers that I think that you should be in this position, and oh, by the way, I'm leaving." And so
Oh wow! So
I was like, so after being there for a very short time, some different people said that they thought that I should take that position, and so I ended up taking it. And I honestly was like not really sure what all that would entail, so it kind of just ended up being an amalgamation of me taking on teams that didn't have maybe somebody that was overseeing them at a director level at the time. And so that meant like I ended up overseeing the character TDs and the shader artists. I ended up overseeing the effects group. I also ended up overseeing the animation group, probably just because I had some animation background and other directors didn't. I ended up being the lead animator at Pipeworks, but that had been a long time ago. Like, I had worked at Naughty Dog for 9 years before I took this job, so it had been at least 9-10 years since I had really done traditional animation. And so I ended up overseeing all these different departments, even built a lighting department as another aspect of our stuff. So I was overseeing a lot of these different things, and a lot of what it entailed for the tech art director part was me looking at what the needs of those departments were, getting to understand just kind of what our tech needs were, helping doing some of the stuff like hiring, finding the right people, fill positions that are missing, looking at holes in those different groups and being like, okay, like we have nobody to cover destruction, nobody to blow stuff up, like not just to make fire explosions, but like what if we want to like destroy something, make it fall apart. And so looking at things like the animation group and being like, wow, we only have so many staff, we're going to need to beef it up to handle this workload. So some of that stuff got a little bit less technical, but I still had to be thinking about the technical ramifications of how do we approach these different things. So at the same time, while I'd be like, we need to hire these more people for animation, I was also thinking about what's our animation footprint? How much memory is our animation using? Okay, well, on one hand, I need to think about how do we compress animation? On the other hand, I need to think about how do we utilize our skeletons better? How do we do things like automate aspects of the skeleton? You see a lot of this stuff in Unreal now, where Epic's starting to build up these systems called control rigs. Yes. And we were doing stuff like that like a long time ago, where we have joints that would be animated based on the math of what other joints were doing, basically trying to get the rig to run at runtime instead of it all being exported. So I'd be thinking about all these different technical aspects to just try to get our stuff in there, use the least amount of memory, be performant, but then also having to think about the team that we'd need to get there.
I mean, it's it's not an easy position, I will say, less like in terms of knowledge, and in terms like management, you need to have like how you say, like jack of all trades. It's like, and like a management skills, so you can fulfill. And I guess it depends studio to studio, maybe change a little the responsibilities. But in it, if you allow me the comparison, maybe with in movies, probably it's the CG supervisor will be the closer the
It's
title.
it's probably, from what I understand. I did work with I hired a guy at Sony Pen that actually was a VFX suit
Hmm.
on our team that was focusing on shaders and lighting. And so I learned quite a bit from him of like how like the film side thought of things. So yeah, it's probably more like a CG supervisor. I've never worked in film at all, so I don't know one to one, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a. I mean, I'm not CG supervisor. I did work in films, but for the description that you given, there is some differences. But yeah, in general, it goes in that direction, like supervising all like departments. So they have like a high position, like point of view, so you can see all the pipeline or all the structure from the high, so you can see how the things flow from one side to the other. So they're very involved also in things like pipeline and things like that, also from the final like quality mesh kind of thing, so there's a lot. And of course there is a lot of managerial tasks there, like that
Yep.
is not uh, down the machine and touching keys. It's more like meetings and management, hiring
Like
people.
not on the box, as they would
Yeah,
say in film.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you would also end up doing things like, and this was happening in some of my other positions too, but like sometimes it'd be talking to vendors and figuring out
Oh,
if a vendor could take on a task so that we don't have to do it internally. That's probably something that's becoming more and more prevalent as we try to we make these giant projects,
mhm.
and you want to make it so how do you not
Uh,
spend as much money?
that's very interesting. I mean, this is maybe a tangent now, but do you feel like in general now, and obviously with all the COVID thing, that's also I guess exploded now with a lot of because the studios that cannot grow like the staff in place, and in terms of like there's more and more like vendoring of or outsourcing of the task for specific uh like modeling or texturing, like you did this. So do you feel like this is something that in the game industry has been growing from the different like from maybe not 10 years ago, but maybe 5 years ago to now? How do you feel that?
I mean, I ended up doing this early on in my career, like at Pipeworks.
Hmm.
We did use some outsourcing, but back then it wasn't you. There weren't as many people to go to. You like if you
Hmm.
went to look, it was a very small list.
Hmm.
But like definitely like as things have progressed, like you look at a company like Naughty Dog, um, we were giant, and we didn't start giant. Like when I started there, we had like 50 people.
Hmm.
When I left the studio, I think we had 400. And so, but um, the only reason we could get that big was because of how well our games sold.
Hmm.
And a lot of studios, um, there's only so many games that will hit that popularity
Hmm.
level. Like we got, I hate to use the term lucky, but like
Hmm.
we made a good product and people really enjoyed playing it. And but like we it took many years of work for us to like establish that and and be given the opportunity to hire specialists in a wide range of positions, um, to have a team that size. But there's a lot of companies where they simply can't. They just can't do that. It's like they don't have like a super successful product that came out and has money coming in, or they're just trying to figure out how to get all the different pieces together. That maybe they can't hire that specialist because they just don't have the time to go find that person, which just hiring people takes a long time.
Oh, yeah.
So I definitely think it's something that is growing, and you can see it from everything from different vendors out there that even Epic has been hiring, like Cubic Motion, 3D Lateral, or yeah, there's a lot more out there now.
Yeah, yeah. I feel yeah. I'm very. I mean, at the studio I work now, we do also like there is a lot of projects going on. We do a lot of partnerships, let's say, and also there's of course outsourcing going. But I feel like nowadays it's, I guess, well, it has a lot of convenience, and also technology has evolved that it makes everything more accessible and more immediate. Like now we talk with Zoom, and maybe a few years ago was not possible to record like a quality podcast. I don't know if I can say that from my podcast, but I hope. But with the sound and everything, it was more like not reliable. But yeah.
Yep.
And just so in terms of character pipeline and rigging in games, how yeah, talking about like this evolution, like from like more sourcing, do you think, I mean, I guess it changed a lot from your Godzilla game to whatever you're doing now. uh, I'm not gonna ask, but everything like that has been from this initial to the position, or the moment that we are now. It's something that must be changed a lot now, I think, in terms of
Yeah.
like complexity, quality, and how it goes for the asset. I'm not talking even like polygon probably is the most clear thing that everybody knows, more polygons, but I think it's not only that.
Yeah, I mean, it went from like, I mean, you can say that I'm working on Perfect Dark, but I just can't go so much beyond that. Okay. But like, so let's see, like when I first was probably even, I'm trying to think what's realistic, of like right as I was getting into school. That was I probably have some timelines mixed up in my head, but I think that was 1998. I'm fairly certain around that time we had like virtual racing. Sega had released virtual racing and virtual fighter. Mm-hmm. We had the amazing I think Killer Instinct at the time was super amazing, what Rare put out. And then like Mortal Kombat, and those were like kind of the pinnacle. I think around that time, my brain's a little fuzzy on dates, but we I think when I first got into school, I was probably thinking like, as I saw what we could do in school, initially was, even though I was super into games, I think I was thinking about, oh, what could I do for like next gen CG stuff. So like, I don't think Pixar had released anything yet, but I was seeing like CG snippets of things that people had done, and I was super like excited by what I was seeing and what could be done with it. And so when I looked at what we had in characters there, like as I got out of school, probably what was like the coolest things, like early on we had like the very early Metal Gear Solid was like pretty simple. A lot of that early stuff was super simplistic, very low polygon. Mm-hmm. I mean, even when it was 3D, like the early stuff on the PlayStation 1, you had like a Tomb Raider, things like that, where like the polygons were just,
Alone in the Dark.
I don't know what the characters made of.
Alone in the Dark, I remember as was
Alone in the Dark.
It was super low.
Yeah, like, I mean, Tomb Raider was like probably the main character. I don't know, 250 polygons. Like, I don't know, it was really low. And so you couldn't really put in much detail. The textures were low. And so as things have gone on, I think one thing that I got really lucky on working on is when I worked on Godzilla games, I was working on essentially a fighter. And so I would go to the arcade as I was working on stuff like that. And I remember a particular game that sticks out to me in my mind as I was looking back at for a variety of reasons. It was a game that I think was called Bloody Roar. And it had some really interesting, it was like a 3D fighter. And it had, what interested me is like a lot of people would do stuff like walk forward, but like if you walked forward, just like say tap the stick or whatever, it would like take one step and it would take a second step. But if it took one step and it didn't make it, it would just like slide back.
Mm-hmm.
And very early on, I started thinking about stuff like, and this seems silly now, but I was thinking about IK and being able to actually do a half step rather than two
Mm-hmm.
full steps. And a lot of early games were just not doing that. They were not very smooth. Um, like one early game that like really blew my mind, I think still stands out pretty good today, even though it's super low polygon, was Mark of Cree. And the animation, it was actually a bunch of Disney animators that worked on that game.
Mm-hmm.
You can actually still get that. You can still find places to play that on now, on the PlayStation and stuff, I think. And they had Mark of Cree, and then they also had a second one, Rise of the Kasai or something. But they're both, but they were just super smooth. They were very God of War like it's like a fighter. And so I think as I was building characters, I was always thinking about both sides. I was always thinking about not just how do you make a character deform better, how do you make it look better, but I was always just thinking how do you make it move better,
Mm-hmm.
because the movement was always really important to me. Very early on, nobody used mocap. Like all those early PS1 games didn't use mocap. But then as we proceeded, I remember at one point working on a game, and I can't remember how we got it, but they were like, "Oh, hey, here, check this out. We can put mocap on your character." And I was like, "Wow, this like feels way better than I can animate. It's picking up nuances of a walk cycle that I just can't do." And so I think that was like a major breakthrough.
Yeah, I well, yeah, even Mortal Kombat was roto, was not mocap, or rotoscopy. I think it was
Yeah, they
big, uh, like first one that was super real in the way that the animation was triggered, but I think was not motion capture, was rotoscopy animation kind of.
So for me, like I would look at all these different games, and it's like I'd look at like something like Mortal Kombat and be like, that's cool, but like it has a lot of weaknesses with the animation systems.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would look at all these different things and like, so some of the things that stuck out to me are not necessarily the ones that everybody like remembers. Like I said, Mark of Cree was like outstanding, like for its time, to the point that it still moves smoother than most games. Up until the bar has definitely been raised now.
Yeah, but sorry, I remember like I was saying Mortal Kombat, but Mortal Kombat the first ones was actually 2D sprite, so just say it. Sorry.
But it's beautiful games. I mean, like some of those early Mortal Kombats and like Killer Instinct, you're just like, I was blown away. Like I remember seeing that and just being like, these graphics are amazing. Like, and I mean the color, like even that simplistic thing that like a lot of the early games didn't have as wide of a range of color or resolution, and so there was a lot of improvements even in that was going on. That didn't really have to do with the character, but the other one, there was one that was like Killer Instinct, but it was dinosaurs. I think it was called Rage.
I mean, I was a big arcade guy. Mainly, I didn't have a console until I was on my 50s, 15 or
one of my first
15,
jobs,
so.
I actually worked in an arcade, so I got to play a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, I missed that. It was a very social, at least in my hometown. Arcades had more than just go and play. It was social something that.
Oh yeah, like the first games like Street Fighter, things like that. The social aspect was like super fun.
Yeah, just go there and hang out. I miss that time. I think, well, here in Japan it still exists. We still have a lot of arcades. That's good point. But yeah, sorry, I'm just going at
super
tangent.
Cool. I don't know, as improvements went on, like I think the improvements over the years, more recent, have become more about like it's hard to like kind of put my finger exactly on stuff,
Mhm.
but it's like for me, like I got super interested at the end of
Mhm.
when I worked at Pipeworks on how do we have more than just joints that move a foot? How
Mhm.
do we have joints that also make the foot look like it has the right volume?
Mhm.
How do we make it where maybe like as you plant the foot, it has some fat like that the volume
Oh.
of the foot like pushes out? And I started like experimenting with that stuff. And this is like even on this was Xbox. This might have been the next Xbox that we were
Mhm.
about to go on to. I think Xbox 360. And I was like, oh well, if we have more power, what can we do with that extra power? And that actually led me into realizing I wanted to keep pushing things, and that's what I
Mhm.
ended up getting a job at Naughty Dog. And again, I just started like just thinking about the improvements for characters. I was like, well, how can we make it for like when I move this arm up, it actually
Mhm.
pushes up the bicep and feels like it's now twisting, and all these
Mhm.
things that were not that common. A lot of games
Mhm.
very early on, they're just like the whole shoulder
Oh
would
yeah.
rip out of its socket. It was, but the polygons were so low that you could barely tell what was going on. It's like they just be like it'd be like rotate the
Where
arm and whole
cut
polygon is
cut area. The first Tekken was even not.
yeah, they didn't even yeah that they cheated. They wouldn't even have like
It's
this whole
cut.
area would be cut.
Yeah, it's like two.
It'd
Yeah.
just be like jammed in there like a Barbie doll.
Yes.
um and so like I started like experimenting with like adding these joints and like just trying to get better definition. And I think the other one was just like faces. Like early faces were just like move the jaw, eyes blink
Mhm.
maybe, and like maybe you can move the eyeball maybe, and very early stuff. And so I think now like over the last 10 years it's just been really I think we've moved into chasing a lot of what the movie industry was already chasing. So we're like trying to recreate high-end faces,
Mhm.
trying to recreate high-end bodies.
Yeah.
Nowadays we can use like for characters, you can have like higher end simulations for like clothing. um, I mean the new hair stuff that you
Yeah.
see coming out of
Unreal.
like that meerkat
Oh
demo
yeah,
that they
yeah,
did
yeah.
with Weta.
Did you saw the new MetaHumans? They released just, I
Yeah.
think, at time of recording was last week, I think. Yeah.
Yep.
And,
That stuff's really cool.
yeah, it's amazing. It's I mean, there's a lot of work there. Like I know the trilateral people. It pushes that, and I download the demos. I want to dig more on that the following months. But I for instance, I still like I saw the videos. I didn't dig on the demos yet, but the it's a lot of joints still, a lot of joints all base. But I guess there must be some also plane shapes also triggering. I think now the new gen and the new like any like modern PC probably can trigger a lot of like what was before only achievable for movies, like having like this complexity on the
Mhm.
structures now like.
Yeah, I mean, we were at Naughty Dog. We were chasing what movie studios were doing. I mean, we were doing all those things where we're like, um, just I don't feel like I feel like we've reached a point where we we can do most of what the movie studios can do on the game side. It just starts becoming more of a how do we how are we smarter with what we have, because you can do anything, but some of it costs a lot of money. Some of
Mhm.
it costs a lot of time. Um, it's like you could like I don't think there's anything stopping us now in this current generation from doing anything as detailed or more detailed than Golem. It's
Mhm.
just it's just that most studios we don't have like say on a film like that they know they're going to make or maybe they didn't, but they spent a lot of money on it, and they managed to make all their money back because there's a lot of Lord of the Rings fans out there.
Mhm.
um I'm one of them. But the golem was really well done. They spent just a ton of time on that character. But it's a lot of it has to do. It's not that we can't run it on the hardware. It's just really about, do you have the skills? Do you have the right people to work on it? And you can get it to work.
Yeah, but I remember, I mean, not long ago was only joints and some limited number of joints. Like I remember watching making of from I think The Last of Us, the first one, where they show a little bit the how they handle the deformation, and was some demos on the facial, and I remember it was quite impressive amount of joints that they used, but it was more basically joints, and I think they use I watched, I think it was a GDC talk. Oh, my memory is terrible, but I think they used it a few blend shapes just to pinpoint some stuff. I don't know, maybe you were there when that was.
I was. I could actually, you could even overlay the video possibly because it's public, a video of one of the things I worked on. I did a talk at PSX. It was a thing that Sony briefly did in Las Vegas, and it was super cool because we did some talks that were not intended to be GDC level. They're more intended to be for fans. And so I demoed what the Uncharted 3 head versus Uncharted 4 head looks like. And I show them side by side, so you can actually kind of look at what the mesh topology was.
Okay, I will.
And you can look at, like, we had 1,000 blend shapes running on that. They were converted to joints. In the end,
I saw that one.
So they were converted to joints in the end, and really all that under the hood really amounts to is, like, it doesn't matter if, like, there's some studios that end up sticking with blend shapes or some go to joints. Like, ultimately it's just, they're just compressing your data down. There's some pretty cool stuff out there already by, like, EA has been very generous in sharing this thing called Dembones, which is basically skinning decomposition, where you can convert blend shapes to joints. And now I'm seeing that sort of stuff everywhere. It used to be really uncommon. We had done it at Naughty Dog. We were probably one of the first studios I know of that used it. But we wrote it ourselves based on a white paper that got released at SIGGRAPH. By we, I mean Hans Goddard, he's really talented tech artist.
Yes, I know him. Yes, it's very.
Works at Blizzard.
I used it. There was a little bit in my previous company. There was a Chinese guy who did an open source version that was working quite well, I think, and I used it a little bit, that one for couple of projects. Basically, we did one short film for Unity that called The Gift, and it was one of the first. We did a lot of work together with Unity Japan, and a lot of the work was done using Alembic. So we used the general pipeline of movie, let's say, and we ported everything with Alembic. So I did all the rigging, facial things like that, and then internally we decided to make like a VR project of this one. It was never released. It was just internal testing. And okay, let's take this rig and just port it to VR. And I was like, wait a second, it's not meant to game engine. And I remember this tool saved my ass, if I can say that on my own podcast, because I just baked those layers
and all those things. Yeah, the skinning decomposition, like it's super powerful if used for the right things. And it was generous of EA to share that. I mean, I think the white paper was already out there, so maybe they just decided it would be nice of them to share it.
We have it on Maya now. I think latest versions of Maya does include something.
There is a version. I think from some of my tests, I think the Dembones was working out better, but I don't know. You know, every situation's different. You never know.
Yeah,
it's now a fairly common thing. So I think there's probably going to be more of them to come. It's a
Yeah.
very interesting idea.
I think also like talking about new technologies that really amaze me. It's the all this machine learning and movement prediction that you have. There's some papers I think from uh I don't know. It, oh, I don't remember the company, but there's a bunch of these papers that happening, and it was one that one ex-colleague of mine did work a little bit on this paper. I think it's a pirate that you have, and you can see the prediction of the path based on the.
Hmm.
So you have milliseconds that predicts where it's gonna be landing, and what you saying, like the animation, it's so much smooth because it's not like blending animation. It's really there is a lot of stuff going in milliseconds there that makes the character that reacts in a way that way more natural with irregular terrains and complex change of movement and direction. Do you saw that one?
Did you say a parrot or a pirate?
I think it was a parrot, like a
Pirate.
character. I think it was
I
with a
have not
dog at
seen
the
that
beginning, and
one.
then
I've seen the one with the dog. I've seen
yeah,
there's like a wolf where they control like a wolf walking different paths. I've seen that. Um, yeah, that stuff's really impressive. It's using like motion matching.
yeah. I will check on that one. And there was the other
Yeah,
one.
I haven't seen the pirate one.
I
But yeah, the
I
wolf one is pretty common. There's like a motion matching one with a wolf where
yeah.
that's using a bunch of machine learning and stuff.
Maybe I'm having now like a short
Oh,
circuit,
there is a
but maybe it's not a
I
pirate. I don't know.
there was a maybe what you're thinking of is there was this guy and shoot, it was like a medieval character.
Or maybe it was a medieval.
Um and it was like honor for honor, and
Maybe.
they were running around with it, and
I
I think that was done by Ubisoft.
yeah, I will check it out and post the links with your talk
Yeah.
and so on the podcast the video
Yeah,
description. So I will add all the links so the people can see it. The yeah, I think from Ubisoft was this one that used these capsule characters, and
mhm.
they changed the volume and the animation it start to evolve, and they use it later. There was a bunch of these also presentations that was amazing.
Ubisoft's done some phenomenal like presentations for like how they're using like motion matching, and also even how they handle like crowds of characters. I'm still blown away by what they did on, I think it was Assassin's Creed Unity, I think was the project where they had this one scene where you like jump off and there's like, they claim, and I don't know if I would disagree with them, it was like 40,000 or 100,000 characters. But they were doing all these cheats where it would be like the characters as they get smaller, but who cares if they did cheats? It's pretty just phenomenal what they did. Like,
I mean, there's not cheating. It's just like
yeah, that's all as part of making a system.
Yeah, exactly. I don't believe in cheating. I believe it's solutions for the problem.
Yeah,
no?
Solutions. There you go.
Yeah, I think
it's amazing. They've published so much stuff that is like really phenomenal technology that they've shared, like at GDCs and stuff.
Yeah, it's every year. This is something that I find really exciting about the game industry, the real-time industry. Because I will not say even game anymore. I think it's real-time technology that is going to be applied to everywhere now. Not only games, but other areas like movies, for instance, or maybe other VR, AR, all these kind of things that converge. I think there's a lot of conversion there, and it's really exciting because if you see all the only for like Unreal, when you see all these every single like version that is a small version like 4.26 is now the latest one, and it's a huge with all the control rig, all the hair, all the other stuff that they're adding that I don't know, because there's so much to, and it's also a little bit humbling, and I don't know if it's stressing is the word, like when you see all this technology coming and you don't, I mean, you don't get stressed yourself, like thinking, oh my, I need to catch up
I think
with all.
more and more now, it's like it's really humbling the amount of tech is out there, because you can't know all of it. You just can't.
Yeah, it's yeah, I'm trying my best to like I know for sure next it's gonna be like I want to really learn the nitty-gritty of control rig and all this in-game rigging technology that I think it's a lot of fun to go there. That family.
Yes. Sorry.
Sorry. It's your
Kids are
Sunday.
yelling out my window. I have 3 kids. I have a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 9-year-old.
Oh.
Always keeping me on my toes.
Yeah, that I have to like. It's now it's 7 and 3 most. Yeah, very soon 4. Yeah, yeah. In general, there's a lot of amazing papers coming, and all this technology.
Yeah.
That's something that you comment before, like when you went to this first GDC and you find out what was technical artist, there was not too many people that was willing to share, and I think right now it's the other way around. It's the people. It's about sharing everything. Well, I don't know if everything, maybe not everything, but we don't know that because they don't share. So, but I think it's more and more common that the people it's willing to share what they learn, what they was the experience, new technology they share. And I don't know if all the papers, maybe some papers have some copyrights, so they show it, but it's like patent, so they can use it. But many of them, it's like pretty open, no? I think.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the scientific papers or ones at SIGGRAPH I've found are sometimes they have like I don't know. That's not like you can just copy their code and make it work. It's like there's definitely some effort that's to be made. And I've also found like sometimes people post stuff that are kind of almost like it's a theory, and they're like, we think this works, and then go try it, and it doesn't necessarily. But I mean, it's amazing because like there's just so much sharing that if you are looking for something, you basically have to go, you have this idea, this is what you want to do. And if you look for it, there's probably somebody that's already started thinking about it before you. And you can kind of start, it gives you a jump start. Like Google is not just like a thing that you go to it's gone to this new level where I feel like you're the sky's the limit, and it also opens up this door where it's not about, well, who has that knowledge in your office. It's like you now have all this extra knowledge at all these other companies or all these even indie developers that share. And it definitely has changed things for the good, but it's also, there's a lot more pressure on you. It's like, oh, well, let's go use Houdini for this thing. Yeah. It's like, oh, I've never used Houdini before. It's like, well, you can just Google it and figure out how to use Houdini. Like, why not? But I think, man, I think some of that stuff gets taken for granted because it really takes a lot of effort for people to go pick up all those new items, everything from substance to at one point Mudbox was getting popular with Zbrush, but then I think Mudbox has lost some of its charm. But there's just so many tools out now, so it's like unbelievable.
I think you need to pick your battles, I will say, and it's more critical than ever to pick the right battles in the way that not only I will say it's important, like invest the time in technology or knowledge that obviously you can take advantage in the future for that, but also like if you're not convinced to something, like in a personal like way of the things, like if you don't like something, it's better don't learn it, because you, as soon as you start tracing a path for your career in one of these areas, you're gonna be required more and more, and it's gonna be really difficult to get out these trains that you're digging down or rabbit hole. You know what I mean? Like if you really want to go for let's say, game design, but you're really good, let's say, at rigging, and you show off on you. I mean, it's amazing. But if you, I think when you go to like lead positions or more like senior positions, it's gonna be higher to, unless you just cut straight and change company something, or maybe reset your career. It's gonna be very difficult to change. I think in a career path.
Yeah, I think I've seen it done. It's not like
But
common, because you do have to reset. So it's like because your common knowledge doesn't like line up with that stuff. Like I have a friend that in LA, he decided he was going to jump into the VFX community, and I can't even remember what he was doing before, but he just like, and I honestly like initially was like, okay, sure, like that's nice. I'm like, it's really hard, but go for it. And so he ended up like going to side effects and training with them, and then he ended up like teaching there, and as he worked up, and then like now I think he's operating as a CD suit. And so he worked his way up, and he just like really applied himself. But it's hard. Like if you go and say, well, now I want to be a designer, it's like there's very few people that can go do that. Like, I mean, I've seen some exceptional people, like actually Neil Druckmann at Naughty Dog, where he actually started there as a, I think he was, I'll probably screw up some of his story, but I think he started there helping with some rendering stuff. And then I think he was a programmer. And then when I worked with him initially, he was like a designer. And then eventually he towards the end of my time working there, he became like the game director. So he kind of, those weren't all traditional paths. Because he was going from typically a designer isn't writing the story. And so he went to writing the story for like The Last of Us. And so, but that's rare, that you don't see that
old layers,
often.
I would say.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah. It's hard to make those pivots.
Yeah,
even from going from artist to tech artist, like as I made that, like I had to learn all this programming stuff that was like initially just like didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I saw that. I have some friends, and like on my previous company at Marsa, my colleague that was rigger, like senior rigger with me, he just changed it to be a director. When I was there, it was kind of funny because it started to direct a project, but it's still in my seat beside me. It was kind of funny to pile out all these storyboards and things, but it was like one, and he was chasing that for a long time, and he get some opportunities inside the company. They prove his skills doing that, and little by little he get it, and he's now directing some TV series and big projects. So
nice.
But yeah, so I see that, and here close to me, like it was kind of funny. I have my tower on the under the table, but in some point I put it on the table because we was this kind of share. So I share one table. Well, not one. It was 2x2, like semi 2Ls like this. But it had so many storyboards that a couple of times just fall on top like avalanche on my desk. So I had to put my like a little how you say, like the wall and the the desk to block the storyboard. Was kind of funny. Oh yeah, so I say very very close to me, just affected me directly with storyboards. But yeah, that's one on the every many years that you see that thing. But yeah, but at the same time, if you like to dig your little path in a very specific thing, and you find the things that you like the most, I think it's very enjoyable when you have like this experience accumulated for years, and you can apply it and share it with colleagues, and be bring value to the company and the production. I think this is also like really awesome feeling, like when you feel value on your work, so that's Yeah, it's hard to choose sometimes. That's it. Okay, I think I was checking the little bullet point list that we did before starting. I think we hit almost, well, not almost, I think we hit everything. And I think it's a good moment to wrap. I just want to thank you again for taking time away from your family and your Sunday. And I know it was difficult for you to schedule the this episode, this call, but I really appreciate it. I think it was really instructive for me, and I hope for the audience also it's gonna be very interesting. And just thank you again for your book. Also, was very useful for me.
You're welcome.
Still,
I'm glad it was.